Hello, this is Foundations of Instructional Delivery, which is Fire and Emergency Services Instructor 1. And this is Chapter 6, Technology and Training. The objectives we're going to cover in this class are as follows. We will describe the types of multimedia tools available for the Fire and Emergency Services Instructor. Describe the advantages and limitations of audiovisual equipment and other teaching tools. Describe how to use multimedia tools. Describe when to use multimedia tools in a presentation. Describe how to maintain instructional technology tools. Training aids have always been used regardless of discipline. Training aids in the fire service have evolved from basic chalkboards to presentation platforms. Although training aids are fundamental, they only help the instructor impart knowledge. As an instructor, it is your responsibility to learn the following: how and when to use these tools, and then how to troubleshoot or repair them. Ultimately, however, you are the instructor and students learn from you. So the bells and whistles are just the bells and whistles. The foundation is you. Technology-based instruction. The most dynamic and fast-changing concept in education and training is technology-based instruction. You may have also heard it be called e-instruction or internet-based instruction or distance learning. And technology-based instruction is defined as presenting training or education using the internet or a cloud-based system. There are advantages and disadvantages to technology-based instruction, or TBI. It tends to be student-centered, which is good in the sense that students control the pace, the rate of delivery, even the time when the information is viewed. And its flexibility is highly desirable to busy adult students. And each student can adapt the material to their individual style. Research supports TBI as more effective because students can repeat the areas they struggle with, and instructors can closely monitor students' progress. In the more traditional learning process, there was more participatory students that carry the load, while some receive a passing grade simply for attendance. TBI is stronger because it will help involve all students, and they can pace themselves a little bit better. Distance learning simply consists of instruction a distance away, basically out of the classroom, when a student's on their own. A student located at home or in a remote classroom receives instruction and assignments from a training center or college or university. It can even take place without the instructor present. And it can be as simple as a package of printed materials sent through mail, which is kind of rare these days, or as complex as flash animation presented during a video conference. Today, the majority of distance learning is accomplished through a combination of the following: reading assignments, online activities and assessments, video conferencing, video presentation, testing with proctors, and written assignments. Student evaluations are processed through an instructor. And this is a pretty long topic: computer-based training and learning management systems. You're going to hear me refer to computer-based training, or CBT, software, and computer-based training, CBT software, provides a virtual course environment with tools for course preparation, delivery, and management. These are tools that help manage course materials and day-to-day tasks. It facilitates collaborative learning. personalizes content based on individual needs and positively affects learning outcomes. It is not limited to colleges and universities, and is also used in private industry and public safety. These types of systems provide a powerful form of teaching. They can inform, illustrate, test, and demonstrate complex concepts simply or more simply. E-learning is a form of CBT, computer-based training. It has had increased popularity and prevalence in recent years, and it involves web-based learning management systems. One example would be like Zoom, for instance, which I don't know when you're listening to this recording, but before school became or was released for the summer in 2020, prior to that, students had to take class at home. So one example of e-learning where teachers could get their whole class together is Zoom, or they got a portion of their students together at a time, and it was strictly web-based learning, and but it was a way for, or one tool that allowed for many students to come together at one time live and receive instruction from their teacher. A learning management system, also called LMS, and we're going to be using these acronyms because there's a lot of verbiage. Learning management system, LMS, is web-based software application that allows online courseware and content to be delivered to learners. This includes classroom administration tools such as activity tracking, grades, communications, and calendars. It is sometimes referred to as a virtual learning environment, VLE, or a learning course management system, LCMS. The software you're using to take this class is a learning management system altogether. Synchronous learning is when all learners are engaged in or receiving content simultaneously. And this is what I was just referring to briefly a moment ago. Some examples are live webcast, webinar, or online chat session. So Zoom calls where teachers or instructors are able to get a whole group of people together at one time. Live is a form of live webcast. You also have asynchronous learning where not all learners are consuming content at the same time. Learners consume educational content at different times and usually at their own pace for asynchronous learning. And the responsibility for students is there in that they must adhere to established submission deadlines as set by the instructor. Now there's also hybrid learning, which is sometimes referred to as blended or distributed learning. This occurs when some content is available online and some learning requires face-to-face instruction or demonstration. Courseware is any educational content delivered via a computer. If you remember, the topic we're on right now is computer-based training and learning management systems. So all of these things I'm describing fall under computer-based training and learning management systems, which are part of that computer-based training. You can also have a flipped classroom. This is an instructional approach that reverses or flips the standard learning environment by delivering online content for self-study. This reserves the physical classroom for mentored practice that traditionally would have been assigned as homework. It allows for more direct application by the student with instructor involvement. The virtual classroom is a digital environment where content can be posted and shared. Instructors create quizzes and assignments to be completed and tracked online via internet-connected computers. You also have webinars, which are simply online meetings, and webinar is a conglomeration of the words web and seminar, which produce the new term appropriately called webinar. These occur in real time and usually allow for participants to share desktop screens, web browsers, and documents as the meeting is occurring. Social learning is an informal method of learning using technologies that enable collaborative content creation. And some examples are blogs, social media, collaborative discussions, and wikis. Instructor-led training, ILT, or when the instructor facilitates both in-person sections and online components of the course. The instructors usually set deadlines for submission, create quizzes and assignments, and track student progress. Self-directed study is when you have prepackaged learning modules that can be designed to allow learners to stop and start as they desire, progress to completion of the module, and then submit a final score to determine whether they passed or failed the module. These can all take place without the instructor's involvement. An example would be Online Incident Command System, or ICS, courses that are freely available from FEMA's Emergency Management Institute. Continuing with computer-based training, or CBT, and learning management systems, one statement of fact holds true, and that is that the popularity of e-learning has exploded in the past few years. Part of that is demand, but another part of that is the software improvements and flexibility and capability of these programs that have allowed them to have so much more performance than they were capable of having just a few years ago. Many colleges and universities have doubled or tripled courses offered via the web. All degree levels can now be completed, and many now expect courses to be offered. I mean, most students, if not many, expect courses to be offered at least in part online. Organizations, that means all universities, professional organizations where there's a lot of training like fire science, etc. All organizations are considering how to best integrate e-learning into the overall instructional experience. No technology can ever replace wisdom and experience of seasoned fire and emergency services instructors. And you have to remember, e-learning is not a threat to instructors. It's a tool meant to support strong instruction. And one thing that this tool allows is the ability to address challenges posed by live training. Now, all skills will eventually need to be performed to be truly learned. There are quite simply some things that just cannot be taught online, and certainly when you're talking about something specific like fire training, you have to be able to handle this equipment and train with this equipment, and that can only be done live. Work with simulators can increase a student's comfort level before actual danger is involved. So simulators are a great tool. Certainly aviation's been using them since practically the dawn of aviation, and there's not a pilot flying who'll tell you that that was not a great tool. A learning management system, or LMS, is a web-based software application that acts as digital content warehouse and a classroom management tool. Canvas is a learning management system of computer-based training. Learning objects or content reside within the LMS. The LMS is accessible to any member who has internet access. And LMS also allows instructors to upload or store documents to online classroom and to link resources in a meaningful way for learners to consume. Uploading documents, however, hardly encompasses the entirety of managing an online classroom. So you need to track the following: how well the students are performing, what they're consuming, and whether relevant objectives are being met. The stronger your learning management system is, of course, the better. But as an instructor, they gave a couple of examples here, but there are several things that you're going to have to track and manage. The LMS is especially a really good system like Canvas, is a very, very strong tool because it helps you as an instructor be more efficient with your time. It doesn't allow you to skip steps, but it does speed up several of those steps. The example of what tools you can use is where classroom management comes into play. How you're able to manage your overall class using an LMS. That's what I was just talking about, basically. On the right, you see an example where you can use editing, assign roles, go straight to grades. If you scroll down, you might have the option where students post questions there. There might be another place where you have given them this ability, but this is just one example of how the administration button or option in your learning management system gives you lots of tools to use. Now, before we move off this topic, a couple of more items, and this is for computer-based training and learning management systems. It is critical that students demonstrate comprehension of topics as well as the capability to perform tasks. Given this requirement, hybrid learning is preferable, especially in the fire service. LMS is not a replacement for the human instructor, as I said a couple of moments ago. It is not a replacement for a human instructor, hands-on evolutions, or face-to-face interactions. And as I pointed out a moment ago, it is an extension of the instructor, not a replacement for the instructor. Hybrid learning takes the best parts of of the learning environment and partners it with computer-based elements for greater student flexibility. But it also gives you better instructional or instructor flexibility as well. Now we're going to talk about multimedia applications in Instructor. A key element in most presentations, especially these days with the technology that is so widely available, is multimedia. And this can range from handouts to slide presentations like the one you're watching now, for instance. These applications help enhance the learning process for students and can make things easier for instructors. Like all technology, however, it can be a distraction if these multimedia applications are used improperly. Knowing how to use your multimedia tools effectively is just as important as knowing your lesson plans. Part of the preparation should focus on reviewing instructional technology or IT tools of the lesson. Let's talk now about understanding multimedia tools. Tools come in a variety of types and are intended for a variety of uses. And here are the many types available: PowerPoint and Keynote software, videos, CBT programs, internet-based training, distance learning, NFA training programs, tablet computers, digital audio players, and smartphones. Each of these fills a specific niche based on the type of learning. You must learn how to use multimedia tools before you can apply them in the learning environment. So this gives you an excuse to spend some time on your pad or your computer or your smartphone. Fully learn how your software operates in each of these because it varies slightly between the PC, the pad, and your phone. And some things cannot be done on phone, whereas they can be done on the computer. So you need to learn how to use these tools for every tool that will run these programs. And this may take a fair amount of preparation, but once you become knowledgeable, it moves much faster, of course. It is up to the instructor to learn how to use these tools correctly and then incorporate them into your job as an instructor. When to use multimedia presentations, this is important. Multimedia presentations enhance learning by allowing students to see, hear, and touch the content. They can be used to help simplify complex theories, reinforce materials through exercises, pictures, or words, summarize previously integrated material, and help maintain student interest. There are occasional drawbacks to using multimedia presentations, and a big one is failure of the media to perform that can put the user at a loss. So have a plan B. We talked about this in earlier chapters. You need, as an instructor, to determine what type of multimedia to use and when it is appropriate to use it. Multimedia sources are not necessarily always needed either. They become more impressive when you use them appropriately and use them well. If all you have are bells and whistles, that really detracts from what you're trying to teach. So know when to use them, and that way they make much more of an impression. The delivery format must be appropriate for the audience and to the nature of the content being presented. Multimedia tools try to break down the resistance of learning by helping to engage the student. Multimedia should be used whenever its application makes it easier to grasp the material, such as bringing the emergency incident into the classroom, demonstrating in a non-threatening environment, exemplifying safety concerns, or using simulation or distance education. The only reason to use multimedia tools is to help students learn. When used as an instructional aid, multimedia helps clarify the information. Its various features dictate how students receive material. Diagrams, flowcharts, and graphics impart information that can be retained by visual learners. Lecture or audio cues assist auditory learners. And in combination, multimedia engages students by involving multiple senses. Some best practices for multimedia: do not read from the slides. The only time it is acceptable to read slides is when reading a quote, a legal definition, standard operating procedure, or a legal statement. Or in the case of what I'm doing here is I'm basically reading off the slides, interjecting some supportive instruction occasionally, but the reason I'm reading off the slides is to help you have not just visual, which is reading, but also auditory input of the material to your brain as well. You need to make sure that you select the appropriate level of lighting for the type of multimedia equipment in use. When it comes to multimedia best practices, there is an art to transitioning from lecture to technology. Practice makes perfect. When lecturing with slides projected behind, do not stand in front of the projection screen. Always have your equipment set up and queued before class. If the internet is required, test for access and then confirm it can handle the media in the presentation. And again, always have a backup plan. Presentation programs include a variety of software like PowerPoint, Keynote, Prezi, SlideDog, and Google Slides. Each has its own features and benefits. The basic style rules are always relevant, and it really pays off strongly to have ability to embed video and audio clips, especially for something like fire service training. There are some disadvantages to presentation programs. One disadvantage is the potential over-reliance on the technology. Another is that you need to have backup technology available. And the point is here that if your PowerPoint program crashes on your computer, you can't just be standing there unsure of what to do. Have a backup technology available. And this is one example of when we were talking in earlier chapters about having a backup plan. Ask yourself, what am I going to do if PowerPoint fails on me? So make sure you plan that out in advance. There's also a disadvantage of overload factor, where you have slides that include too much information or too many visual effects. And it is very distracting to have slides where you have the title scroll across and every point come up from the bottom. And if it's a slide that it has a lot of information on it, that can be extremely distracting. Now, a better solution, of course, is to spread that information across slides and minimize some of the really cool stuff that does help presentations come across more strongly. But ask yourself, is this just too much or not enough? But there is definitely a disadvantage for potential of overload. So keep presentations simple and concise. Some suggestions for uses of slides. List the major points of your presentation. These points may develop or remain on the screen for a long time. They can be used to create prompts for group work or contain breakouts to indicate how each group will handle different scenario aspects. And always give credit where credit is due, regardless of how the materials are found. Presentation-ready programs are programs where educational publishers will provide instructors with presentation-ready programs for use on computers. These can include slide presentations, test banks, handouts, and other course-specific material. However it comes to you, and if it contains one or all of these elements listed above or others, you must still familiarize yourself with the presentation before class. And remember, as we stated earlier too, materials never replace the instructor. So another thing to always remember is to never consider that these materials are truly ready to use. You need to review them and adapt them. I've found myself correcting misspelling or wording on slides very often. We're going to move on now to data projectors. These have become indispensable in every classroom. And LCD and DLP projectors are used with video players, computers, and visual projectors to display documents, images, and motion pictures. The screens can range from 2 to 30 feet wide. Some features to consider is if your projector has the ability to show videos directly, audio capabilities, screen resolution, brightness of light emitted by the projector, the price of the equipment, and the lifespan of the bulb. And I would recommend, if you're ever in the position of being consulted on models to buy, is that they have audio capability, so you're not relying strictly on your computer and it's one less connection to have to worry about. And also the ability, which isn't listed here, the ability for it to have a Bluetooth connection so that you have Bluetooth capability and patch cord capability for connection. These data projectors should be compact enough to be able to be moved among facilities. So you find yourself as an instructor taking your projector with you. Always make sure you have an extra bulb available. Also make sure that the cables match the output of the computer and the input of the projector, and that you have cables that are really long. And you must also make sure that you have an adapter that works with the equipment if necessary. Sometimes you need a special adapter. Make sure you learn the proper startup procedure for specific data projector that you either are taking with you or that's generally available to you. Make sure that you know how to start them up, because it does vary between make and model. Your projector should be connected to your computer before you turn it on. Some computers will automatically recognize the data projector device that you're using, but often you must press Control Function key to activate the connection. And always test this presentation before class. Now we're going to discuss digital audio players and portable media devices. Portable media devices are so compact that students carry them easily and download content to review outside of class. Portable media device is just a fancy way of saying iPads or their equivalents and phones. But also laptops have become so small and light. They certainly have become an indispensable part of the class training. Now, while the phone will do a lot and does allow recording on site, you do not want phones on in class. If a student requests to use it for recording, that's fine. But if you see them banging away on their phone, that isn't fine. So you put the option to them. They can either record and let it sit there and record, or they have to use another device for recording. Now, having said that about phones, those same things apply to a different degree with iPads or touchpads. They can record from those as well. They are much more conspicuous as far as someone trying to use them in class. So students do tend to pretty much stick to recording with them. But do make sure that, like the phone, if they're going to use it for recording, then there's nothing for them to be clicking away while it's recording. So you do need to monitor that. There are many media outlets engaged in offering downloads or podcasts to these devices, of course. You may also find that digital audio players help allow completion of class assignments. For instance, if someone wants to, or if they've had something assigned to research, to go out and look at, for instance, fire department connections and standpipe systems. If they want to go to a facility and after seeking permission to do so, allow the student to not only record with video but also audio and help describe particular connections that they're reviewing for their assignment. That's one way these tools can be used. In some classes, there may also be the ability to use video editing software to help create and edit assignments. The results are uploaded to the training center's computer system for presentation or content playback. And these devices can store not only images and audio, but sometimes an entire presentation. The possibilities for classroom use are practically endless. Some examples are classroom performance and practice, group discussions, field interviews, interviews with experts, classroom lectures, discussions or presentation, and also even a podcast helps replace a webcast, which allows wider distribution. So if there's a webcast that occurred and you want to be able to publish that webcast, you can do so as a podcast. As more things become available and costs are lowered by demand, fire service instruction may be transformed. I can truthfully say in the last 5 years leading up to 2020, it already has been transformed. But it, like all things, is going to continue to evolve and will change dramatically in the next 5 years, no doubt. Now, I mentioned tablets briefly a couple of minutes ago. Tablet computers have become, instead of having a laptop and a tablet, they're starting to really become one and the same these days. So the latest tablets are essentially a wireless computer with a touch screen. They're generally smaller than a computer, but definitely larger than a smartphone. And the keyboard is either on screen or external and attached to the device. So lately you can just basically attach or set your tablet in like a little stand, and the keyboard's attached to the stand folder, and they just work. Tablets offer a wide range of features. Cameras are integrated in. The student can usually integrate their phone functions into it. Access to ebooks becomes easier to manage in class and for the student generally. Video conferencing is nice because it is, again, smaller than your laptop to carry around and larger than your phone. So they're nice for video conferencing, and also for GPS navigation. In regards to tablets, many fire and EMS agencies have adopted these devices for fire inspections, pre-planning activities, and helping gather information in a medical emergency. There are, of course, many other things that they've been adapted for as well. Students use them for taking notes, completing and submitting assignments, viewing course material, and conducting research in class. Now, I talked about use of phone and tablets in class earlier. If they want to record with them, they don't need to be banging away at the same time on them. Now, that being said, that's a little harder to manage with a tablet because students want to type their notes sometimes as opposed to handwriting them, which is fine. So your monitoring is going to have to be a little more adroit. For instance, if you want to walk among the students a little more, if there are a few using tablets to take notes, and make sure that's what they're actually using them for. You know, if you just are lecturing or bringing up a topic for discussion, move among the students and take a glance at what they're actually using their tablet for. An emerging trend in many programs is to issue a tablet preloaded with textbook, course materials, and interactivities. Many instructors use tablets during lectures that connect to their cloud storage to access developed media presentations. I have found personally that it's just much easier to use a laptop because I have everything readily available. The screen is larger on my laptop, and it's easier to run multiple applications through a single device. If you're trying to juggle between a couple of devices, it can get a little bit tedious. Interactive boards have become more available. They're typically mounted to the wall and use touch detection for user input. The projector is used to display the computer's video output on an interactive board, which acts basically as a large touchscreen. And they come with pens and quote-unquote digital ink. They're nice. They're very expensive, so you're not likely to encounter them on a large scale for a few years yet, but become familiar with them because they will be coming to your classroom one day. In regards to interactive boards, while using the system, a computer records the material so it can be saved and reviewed at a later time and subsequently emailed to students. They're really nice. Then, of course, there are the ever-present dry erase boards and easel pads. They're low-tech, simple, and readily accessible, and they work great. Do make sure to keep your dry erase markers separate from your permanent markers, because if you use a Sharpie on a whiteboard, you've basically trashed it. So do be disciplined about using your dry erase markers and making sure that they are packed separately and labeled clearly. Easel pads or flip charts can be developed during, before, or after a presentation. So if you have things to prepare ahead of time, like preloading points for discussion, where you're going to write the topic at the top and some bullet points down the side, or however you want to fix it to fill in while you're working with the class, you can do that. What's nice about them too is you can pull the pages out, tape them to the wall if you need to. if that's real handy if you're breaking the class up into groups, for example, and there are some elements that they need to make sure they follow, they can quickly look up and reference them. And sometimes you use them during class, where just like you would on dry erase board, where you're marking things or writing things down as you go. Like the example I just gave, the easel pads are great in small group settings and flexible, and each group can contribute and post responses. In other words, they're going to write down what they're talking about or key elements of what they've been doing. And it's nice to have these hard copies because, as I mentioned, they can be referenced quickly. They're sitting right there, maybe posted to the wall or sitting there on the easel, and you can access them readily. Some of them are nice. They're like giant Post-its where they have a sticky side, so you can take the sheets and stick them straight to the wall without struggling with tape. Let's talk now about virtual reality and simulation. These devices allow students to interact with computer-simulated environment. The displays can be either on a computer screen or via a headset. Sometimes they're kind of integrated. The goal is to immerse the student in an environment that can be controlled by the student and programmer. These provide a sensory experience designed to help force feedback from the student while they're interacting with the simulator. It provides visual, auditory, and tactile sensations that create an artificial world wherein the student can make mistakes without causing injury. These can be designed to mimic a real-world scenario and are set up to a degree to resemble a video game. With virtual reality and simulation, they may become a standard means of training in the near future, given that they have more and more a realistic look and feel, faster processors, and the more that are being used means the demand's going to drive the price down as they become more available in the market. So hopefully they become more cost-effective systems that are available in the near future. Simulators allow students to interact safely with hazards in a controlled environment. They were initially developed for the military and also aviation, and many are accustomed to being immersed in an imaginary world. Your students from the last 20 years have become serious gaming participants. So many of your students are familiar with being in an alternate reality or an imaginary world. The newer systems provide or mimic movements of the operator to help accomplish a mission. But an important thing to remember is that simulations, no matter how simple or complex, allow students to be challenged and learn from their mistakes safely and in a controlled environment. These are developed both commercially and non-commercially. Simulators help provide emergency responders with the opportunity to develop skills in the following areas: command, control, coordination, and communications. These programs are designed to test and validate student understanding of emergency operations. While simulations are not the same as live fire training, the student still walks away with concepts that can be internalized and applied later. In other words, it's a good environment for them to start pulling several things together. Elements of a particular skill, for example, or how to perform in a potentially hazardous environment, when fighting a fire, where there's presence of hazmat materials that are discovered. What do you do then? Those kinds of things. Really, the opportunities for subject matter are practically limitless. As with live fire, replication of exact circumstances is difficult at best, but the same conditions can be repeated until an acceptable outcome is reached. Online certification courses use simulations for both instruction and evaluation purposes. Directed and distance learning opportunities can capture training opportunities with this technology and help bring realism to the learning environment. We're going to talk about audio systems now, and depending on your class size and classroom arrangement, a microphone and audio system may be needed. Although obviously this is not new technology, it is often misunderstood. When deciding what type of audio system to use, keep your presentation style in mind. For example, do you move around a lot? If you do, a lectern with a fixed microphone is not necessarily your best audio setup. Wireless systems offer the most freedom. There may be an issue with frequency usage. And in other words, if your audio system or your wireless system that you're using, you might have interference from other frequencies where you might be hearing voices that are not supposed to be part of your program. So make sure that if you're going to use an audio system, Bluetooth systems still tend to be the best because they're linked straight through your computer only, or the devices that you have attached to it. Sometimes there are limitations on how far a microphone can go from a receiver and still operate. So as I was just saying, Bluetooth systems tend to be the best option. Sometimes you are still encountering wired systems. So if that's the case, you may have a cable, like attached to your microphone, for instance, that may not be long enough for the instructor to move around effectively. And as I mentioned a moment ago, some wired microphones are permanently mounted. And there's also a potential tripping hazard. So if you're teaching in a classroom where you need to have enhanced audio and you have a lectern with a mounted microphone, make sure that you have taken the time to become familiar with A, how it works, and B, that it works, but also that you're comfortable using it. Like all things, technology must be maintained, and it is an important thing, not just an important consideration, but an important thing to do every day. Some vendors can charge an additional fee to repair or replace damaged materials. When purchasing multimedia tools, get maintenance contracts in writing and understand what contracts cover in terms of repair and maintenance. Some products require less maintenance than others. Also, in terms of technology, be aware of trade-offs between high technology and good traditional methods. So, just like the flip charts I was talking about just a moment ago, they're inexpensive, very useful in the classroom, and why spend tons of money to replace them with technology that frankly doesn't fill the niche that you need the flip chart for in your classroom. So the need to decide what technology you use is based on several factors and what is appropriate for the event or presentation. So just like the example I gave, flip chart versus high tech. Technology has become a little more durable as it has developed over the last few years, but it's still somewhat frail. So make sure that you keep your technological devices clean and in good order. Then also make sure to follow the manufacturer's recommended maintenance practices. Sometimes not following these practices can void your warranty, so make sure you're maintaining it correctly. Most devices only need the occasional lens cleaning and dusting near the fan, like your projector, for instance, or your computer. Make sure it's dusted well. Do make sure to inspect cable connections regularly for bending or fraying. And do make sure your device has the latest software updated and in use. If your organization is considering building a training room with a training center, consult with a reputable company with technical expertise. This will avoid you having to retrofit sound systems, lighting, and audiovisual products. Troubleshooting common multimedia problems. There are many things that can go wrong when using multimedia applications, and we've covered a few of these. So you need to know and practice a few alternatives to these applications. The simplest thing that can go wrong can often be easily fixed by just taking a deep breath and thinking about the problem and potential solutions. Now, that being said, this goes much more easily if you have prepared yourself well, and as we've relentlessly stated, have a backup plan. So if your bulb suddenly goes out on your projector, if your audio suddenly fails, you have a way to troubleshoot it quickly and hopefully come up with a quick solution. In other words, you're now implementing your backup plan. When you're troubleshooting common problems with your multimedia, take the time to work with your equipment, as I mentioned just a moment ago. Work with it, play with it, find out what all it will do, become efficient with how your connections work, etc. It becomes much more easy to troubleshoot when you're extremely familiar with your equipment. An important thing also is to know the equipment's limitations. So if it won't do something, it might be that you're asking it to do something it can't do. Again, that boils down to familiarity. And then if something does go wrong, as we've mentioned relentlessly, now is the time to implement your famous Plan B. You may find yourself using the help files contained in most software programs. They can be tedious, but if you've explored this, it becomes easier to use them. Now let's summarize what we've covered in this chapter. The first thing we talked about is that although training aids are fundamental in assisting the instructor in the learning process, remember they are still simply aids. They're just tools that are designed to help you impart the knowledge your students need to know and understand. One of the most dynamic and fast-changing concepts in education and training is TBI, also known as e-instruction or internet-based instruction or distance learning. All different terms for the same thing. TBI is a good example of student-centered learning because course materials can be delivered in a variety of methods, providing each student with the resources that appeal to them. We talked about CBT software and how it enables instructors to prepare course materials and efficiently manage day-to-day teaching tasks. Many CBT programs offer features that allow you to facilitate collaborative learning, personalize content based on students' unique needs, and positively affect learning outcomes. LMS is a web-based software application that allows online courseware and content to be delivered to learners, which also includes classroom administration tools such as activity tracking, grades, communications, and calendars. We talked about multimedia tools and how they enhance the instructors or the learning process for students and can make the instructor's job easier. At the same time, multimedia tools can be a distraction if they're poorly developed or used improperly. We also discussed that professionally developed presentations are intended to enhance students' learning experience, but these do not and should not replace the experienced instructor. Instructors must make sure to review materials ahead of time and adapt them to the students who will ultimately be using them. Digital audio players have become a mainstream technology for students at most universities. Students can carry these devices easily and download lectures or pictures that can be reviewed outside of class. Virtual reality devices or simulators allow students to interact with a computer-simulated environment. The goal is to immerse the student in an environment that can be controlled by the student and the programmer. And like virtual reality systems, simulators allow students to interact safely with hazards in a controlled environment. Now, they do have these mentioned separately to a degree, virtual reality devices and simulators, and what you're going to find, especially in the next few years, is that virtual reality and simulators they're already integrated to a large degree, but they're becoming more and more integrated so that when you say simulators, that just automatically is going to include virtual reality devices. And I'm just taking a minute to make sure that you're clear on each of these, but how they also are connected in terms of use and potential use. We talked about also that with any technology, maintaining the quality of multimedia tools is important. Multimedia tools should be used to simplify complex theories or assist instructors in reinforcing their message through exercises or images. And finally, we discussed how selecting the right media application is critical. When used as an instructional aid, the right tool allows you to clarify the information you present to your students. Thank you so much for your time and attention for this chapter. This is not as technically complex, but as you're always encouraged to do, if you need a particular question or questions answered that you do not find referenced in your text, please make sure to contact your instructor. Again, thank you so much for your attention for Chapter 6. We will meet again for Chapter 7.